Chapter 29. The High King is restored to his own chamber so he may rest. I fed my blood-stained dress to the fire, put on a robe, and plan. If none of the courtiers saw my face before Balakin sent them away, then wrapped in my cloak, I might not have been identified. And, of course, I can lie. But the question of how to avoid blame for the murder of the Underseas ambassador pales beside the question of what to do about Madoc. With half the army gone along with the general, if Orlaf decides to strike, I have no idea how to repel her. Cardan will have to choose another Grand General, and quickly, and he will have to inform the lower court of Madoc's defection to make sure it is known he doesn't speak with the voice of the High King. There must be a way to drive Madoc back to the High Court. He's proud, but practical. Perhaps the answer lies in something to do with Oak. Perhaps it means I ought to make my hopes for Oak's rule less opaque. I am thinking over all this when a knock comes to my door. Outside, a messenger, a lilac-skinned girl in royal livery. "The High King requires your presence. I am to conduct you to his chambers." I take an steady breath. No one else might have seen me, but Cardan cannot fail to guess. He knows whom I went to meet and how late I returned from that meeting. He saw the blood on my sleeve. You command the High King, not on the other way around, I remind myself, but the reminder feels hollow. "Let me change," I say. The messenger shakes her head. "The king made it clear I was to ask you to come at once." When I get to the royal chambers, I find Cardan alone, dressed simply, sitting in a throne-like chair. He looks wan, and his eyes still shine a bit too much, as though maybe poison lingers in his blood. "Please," he says, "sit." Wearily, I do. "Once you had a proposal for me," he says. "Now I have one for you. Give me back my will. Give me back my freedom." I suck in a breath. I'm surprised, although I guess I shouldn't be. No one wants to be under the control of another person, although the balance of power between us, in my view, has careened back and forth despite his vow. My having command of him has felt like balancing a knife on its point, nearly impossible and probably dangerous. Still, to give it up would mean giving up any semblance of power. It would be giving up everything. "You know I won't do that." He doesn't seem particularly put off by my refusal. "Hear me out. What you want from me is obedience for longer than a year and a day. More than half your time is gone. Are you ready to put Oak on the throne?" I don't speak for a moment, hoping he might think his question was rhetorical. When it becomes clear that's not the case, I shake my head. "And so you thought to extend my bow. Just how were you imagining doing that?" Again, I have no answer, certainly no good one. It's his turn to smile. "You thought I had nothing to bargain with." Underestimating him is a problem I've had before, and I fear I will have again. "What bargain is possible?" I ask. "When what I want is for you to make the bow again, for at least another year, if not a decade, and what you want is for me to rescind the bow entirely." "Your father and sister tricked me," Cardan says. "If Tarin had given me a command, I would have known it wasn't you. But I was sick and tired and didn't want to refuse you. I didn't even ask why you'd. I wanted to show you that you could trust me, that you didn't need to give me orders for me to do things. I wanted to show you that I believed you'd thought it all through. But that's not way to rule, and it's not really even trust, when someone can order you to do it anyway. Fire is suffered with us at each other's throat. You attempted to make me do what you thought needed to be done, and if we disagreed, we could do nothing but manipulate each other. That wasn't working, but simply giving in is no solutions. We cannot continue like this. Tonight is proof of that. I need to make my own decisions." "You said you didn't mind so much listening to my orders." It's a paltry attempt at humor, and he doesn't smile. Instead, he looks away, as though he can't quite meet my eyes. "All the more reason not to allow myself that luxury. You made me the High King, youth. Let me be the High King." I fold my arms protectively over my chest. "And what will I be? Your servant?" I hate that he's making sense, because there's no way I can give him what he's asking. I can't step aside, not with Madoc out there, not with so many threats. And yet, I cannot help recalling what the bomb said about Cardan's not knowing how to invoke his connection to the land, or what the road said about Cardan's thinking of himself as a spy pretending to be a monarch. Marry me, he says. Become the Queen of Elbham. I feel a kind of cold shock come over me, as though someone has told a particularly cruel joke. With me, it's turgid, as though someone looked into my heart and saw the most ridiculous, most childish desire there and used it against me. But you can't. I can, he says. Kings and queens don't often marry for something other than a political alliance, true, but consider this a version of that. And were you queen, you wouldn't need my obedience. You could issue all your own orders, and I would be free. I can't help thinking of how mere months ago I fought for a place in the court, hoping desperately for knighthood, and didn't even get that. The irony that it's Cardan, who insisted that I didn't belong in Faerie at all, offering me this makes it all the more shocking. He goes on. Moreover, it's not as though we'd be married forever. Marriages between kings and queens must last as long as they rule, but in our case, that's not so long. Only until Oak is old enough to rule, assuming that's what he wants. You could have everything you want at the price of merely releasing me from my vow of obedience. My heart is pounding so hard that I fear it will stutter to a stop. You're serious? I manage. Of course I am, in earnest as well. I look for the trick, because this must be one of those fiery bargains that sound like one thing but turn out to be something very different. So, let me guess. You want me to release you from your vow for your promise to marry me? But then the marriage will take place in the month of Never, when the moon rises in the west and the tides flow backward? He shakes his head, laughing. If you agree, I will marry you tonight, he says. Now, even, right here. We exchange vows, and it is done. This is no mortal marriage, to require being presided over and witnessed. I cannot lie, I cannot deny you. It's not long until your vow is up, I say, because the idea of taking what he's offering, the idea that I could not only be part of the court, but the head of it, is so tempting that it's hard not to just agree, no matter the consequences. Surely, the idea of a few more months tied to me can be such a hardship that you'd like to tie yourself to me for years. As I said before, a lot can happen in a year and a day. Much has happened in half that time. We sit silently for a moment as I try to think. For the last 7 months, the question of what would happen after a year and a day has haunted me. This is a solution, but it doesn't feel at all practical. It's this type of absurd daydream, imagined while dozing in a mossy glen, too embarrassing to even confess to my sisters. Mortal girls do not become queens of Fairyland. I imagine what it would be like to have my own crown, my own power. Maybe I wouldn't have to be afraid to love him. Maybe it would be okay. Maybe I wouldn't have to be scared of all the things I've been scared of my whole life, of being diminished and weak and lesser. Maybe I would become a little bit magic. Yes, I say, but my voice fails me. It comes out all breath. Yes. He leans forward in the chair, eyebrows raised, but he doesn't wear his usual arrogant mien. I cannot read his expression. To what are you agreeing? Okay, I say. I'll do it. I'll marry you. He gives me a wicked grin. I had no idea it would be such a sacrifice. Frustrated, I flop over on the couch. That's not what I mean. Marriage to the High King of Elbham is largely thought to be a prize, an honor of which few are worthy. I suppose his sincerity could last but only so long. I roll my eyes, grateful that he's acting like himself again, so I can better pretend not to be overawed by what's about to happen. So, what do we do? I think of Tarin's wedding and the part of the ceremony we did not witness. I think of my mother's wedding too. The vows she must have made to Madoc. And abruptly a shiver goes through me that I hope has nothing to do with premonition. It's simple, he says, moving to the edge of the chair. We pledge our troth. I'll go first, unless you wish to wait. Perhaps you imagined something more romantic. No, I say quickly, unwilling to admit to imagining anything to do with marriage at all. He slides my ruby ring off his finger. I, Cardan, son of Eldred, High King of Elham, take you and you, Duarte, mortal ward of Madoc to be my bride and my queen. Let us be wed until we wish for it to be otherwise, and the crown has passed from our hands. As he speaks, I begin to tremble with something between hope and fear. The words he's saying are so momentous that they're surreal, especially here in Eldred's own rooms. Time seems to stretch out. Above us, the branches begin to bud, as though the land itself heard the words he spoke. Catching my hand, he slides the ring on. The exchange of rings is not a fiery ritual, and I am surprised by it. Your turn, he says into the silence. He gives me a grin. I'm trusting you to keep your word and release me from my bond of obedience after this. I smile back, which maybe makes up for the way that I froze after he finished speaking. I still can't quite believe this is happening. My hand tightens on his as I speak. I, you Duarte, take Cardan, High King of Elfham, to be my husband. Let us be wed until we don't want to be, and the crown has passed from our hands. He kisses the scar of my palm. I still have his brother's blood under my fingernails. I don't have a ring for him. Above us, the buds are blooming. The whole room smells of flowers. Drawing back, I speak again, pushing away all thoughts of Balakin, of the future in which I am going to have to tell him what I've done. Cardan, son of Eldred, High King of Elfham, I forsake any command over you. You are free of your vow of obedience, for now and for always. He lets out a breath and stands a bit unsteadily. I can't quite wrap my head around the idea that I can't even think the words. Too much has happened tonight. You look as if you've barely rested. I rise to be sure that if he falls over, I can grab for him before he hits the floor. Although I am not so sure of myself either. I will lie down, he says, letting me guide him toward his enormous bed. Once there, he does not let go of my hand. If you lie with me, with no reason to object, I do. The sense of unreality heightening. As I stretch out on the elaborately embroidered comforter, I realize that I have found something far more blasphemous than spreading out on the bed of the High King, far more blasphemous than sneaking Cardan's signet onto my finger, or even sitting on the throne itself. I have become the Queen of Fairy. We trade kisses in the darkness, blurred by exhaustion. I don't expect to sleep, but I do. My limbs tangled with his, the first restful sleep I've had since my return from the Undersea. When I am awakened, it is to a banging on the door. Cardan is already up, playing with the vial of clay the bomb brought, tossing it from hand to hand. He's still dressed, his rumpled aspect giving him only an air of dissipation. I pull my rope more tightly around me. I am embarrassed to be so obviously sharing his bed. Your Majesty, says the messenger, a knight. Your brother is dead. There was a duel, from what we've been able to determine. Ah, Cardan says. And the Queen of the Undersea? The knight's voice trembles. She's here, demanding justice for her ambassador. I just bet she is. Cardan's voice is dry, clipped. Well, we can hardly keep her waiting. You, what's your name? The knight hesitates. Rannoch, your Majesty. Sir Rannoch, assemble a group of knights to escort me to the water. Wait in the courtyard. But the general, he begins. Is not here right now, Cardan finishes for him. I will do it, the knight says. I hear the door close, and Cardan rounds the corner, expression haughty. Well, wife, he says to me, a chill in his voice. It seems you have kept at least one secret from your dowry. Come, we must dress for our first audience together. My heart drops, but there is no time to explain, and no good explanation either. I am left to rush through the holes in my rope. Back in my rooms, I call for my sword and throw on my velvets, all the while wondering what it will mean to have this new-found status and what Cardan will do now that he is unchecked. Chapter 30. Orlaf waits for us in a choppy ocean, accompanied by her daughter and a pot of knights mounted on seals and sharks and all manner of sharp-toothed sea creatures. She herself sits on an orca and is dressed as though ready for battle. Her skin is covered in shiny silvery scales that seem both to be metallic and to have grown from her skin. A helmet of bone and teeth hides her hair. Nicasia is beside her, on a shark. She has no tail today. her long legs covered in armor of shell. All along the edge of the beach are clumps of kelp, washed up as though from a storm. I think I see other things out in the water. The back of a large creature swimming just below the waves, the hair of drowned mortals blowing like seagrass. The undersea's forces are larger than they seem at first glance. Where is my ambassador? Orlaf demands. Where is your brother? Cardan is seated on his grey steed, in black clothes and a cloak of scarlet. Beside him are 2 dozen of mounted knights and both Michael and Newar. On the ride over, they try to determine what Cardan had planned, but he has kept his own counsel from them and, more troublingly, from me. Since hearing of the death of Balikin, he's said little and avoided looking in my direction. My stomach churns with anxiety. He looks at Orlaf with a coldness that I know from experience comes from either fury or fear. In this case, possibly both. As you well know, he is dead. It was your responsibility to keep him safe, she says. Was it? Cardan asks with exaggerated astonishment, touching his hand to his breast. I thought my obligation was not to move against him, not to keep him from the consequences of his own risk-taking. He had a little duel, from what I hear. Dueling, as I am sure you know, is dangerous. But I neither murdered him, nor did I encourage it. In fact, I quite discouraged it. I attempt to not let anything I am feeling show on my face. Orlaf leans forward as though she senses blood in the water. You ought not to allow such disobedience. Cardan shrugs nonchalantly. Perhaps. Michael shifts on his horse. He's clearly uncomfortable with the way Cardan is speaking, carelessly, as though they are merely having a friendly conversation and Orlaf hasn't come to chisel away his power, to weaken his rule. And if she knew Madoc was gone, she might attack outright. Looking at her, looking at Nicasia's sneer and the Selkies and Merfolk's strange wet eyes, I feel powerless. I have given up command of Cardan, and for it I have his vow of marriage, but without anyone knowing, it seems less and less as though it ever happened. I am here to demand justice. Balikin was my ambassador, and if you don't consider him to be under your protection, I do consider him to be under mine. You must give his murderer to the sea, where she will find no forgiveness. Give us your senescal, Jude Duarte. For a moment, I feel as though I can't breathe. It's as though I am drowning again. Cardan's eyebrows go up, his voice stays light. But she's only just returned from the sea. So you don't dispute her crime? Asks Orlak. Why should I? Asks Cardan. If she's the one with whom he duelled, I am certain she would win. My brother suppose himself expert with the sword, a great exaggeration of abilities, but she's mine to punish or not, and I see fit. I hate hearing myself spoken of as though I am not right there when I have his pledge of troth, but his queen killing an ambassador does seem like a worse political problem. Orlak's gaze doesn't go to me. I doubt very much she cares about anything, but that Cardan gave up a lot for my return, and by threatening me, she believes she can get more. King of the land, I am not here to fight your sharp tongue. My blood is cold, and I prefer blades. Once, I considered you as a partner for my daughter, the most precious thing in the sea. She would have brokered a true peace between us. Cardan looks at Nicasia, and although Orlaf leaves him an opening, for a long moment, he does not speak, and when he does, he only says, Like you, I am not skilled at forgiveness. Something in Queen Orlaf's manner changes. If it's what you want, you would be unwise to declare it on an island. Around her, waves grow more violent, their white caps of froth larger. Whirlpools coalesce just off the edge of the land, small ones, deepening, only to spin themselves out as new ones form. War? He peers at her as though she said something particularly puzzling and it vexes him. Do you mean for me to really believe you want to fight? Are you challenging me to a duel? He's obviously baiting her, but I cannot imagine to what benefit. And if I was? She asks. What then, boy? The smile that curves his lip is voluptuous. Beneath every bit of your sea is land, seething, volcanic land. Go against me, and I will show you what this boy will do, my lady. He stretches out his hand. and something seems to rise to the top of the water around us, like a pale scrum, sand, floating sand. Then, all around the cart of the undersea, water begins to churn. I stare at him, hoping to catch his eye, but he's concentrating. Whatever magic he's doing, this is what Bafen meant when he said the hiking was tied to the land, was the beating heart and the star upon whom Elfham's future was written. This is power, and to see Cardan wield it is to understand just how inhuman he is, how transformed, how far outside my control he's moved. Stop! Orlaf shouts as the churning turns to boiling. A stretch of ocean bubbles and seethes as the folk of the undersea scream and scatter, swimming out of range. Several seals come up on the black rocks near the land, calling to one another in their language. Nikas's shark is spun sideways, and she plunges into the water. Steam billows up from the waves, blowing hot. A huge white cloud rolls across my vision. When it clears, I can see that new earth is coalescing from the depths, hot stone cooling as we watch. With Nikasha kneeling on the growing isle, her expression half amazement and half terror. Cardan? She calls. One corner of his mouth is turned up in a little smile, but his gaze is unfocused. He believed that he needed to convince Orlaf that he wasn't feckless. Now I see he's come up with a plan to do that, just as he came up with a plan to throw off the yoke of my control. During my month in the undersea, he changed. He began scheming schemes, and he has become disturbingly effective at them. I am thinking of that as I watch grass grow between Nicasia's toes and wildflowers spring up all along the gently rising hills, as I notice the trees and brambles sprout, and as the trunk of a tree begins to form around Nicasia's body. Cardan! She screams, as bark wraps around her, closing over her waist. What have you done? Orlaf cries as the bark moves higher, as branches unfold, budding with leaves and fragrant blossoms, petals blow out onto the waves. Will you flood the land now? Cardan asked Orlaf with perfect calm, as though he didn't just cause a fourth island to rise from the sea. Send salt water to corrupt the roots of our trees and make our streams and lakes brackish? Will you drown our berries and send your merfolk to slit our throats and steal our roses? Will you do it if it means your daughter will suffer the same? Come, I dare you. Release Nicasia, says Orlaf, the fat heavy in her voice. I am the High King of Elham, Cardan reminds her, and I mislike being given orders. You attacked the land, you stole my senescal and freed my brother, who was imprisoned for the murder of our father, Eldred, with whom you had an ill alliance. Once we respected each other's territory. I have allowed you too much disrespect, and you have overplayed your hand. Now, Queen of the Undersea, we'll have a truce as you had with Eldred, as you had with Map. We'll have a truce, or we will have a war, and if we fight, I will be unsparing. Nothing and no one you love will be safe. Orlaf pauses, and I suck in my breath, not at all sure what will come next. Very well, High King. Let us have an alliance. Give me my daughter, and we will go. I exhale. He was wise to push her, even though it was terrifying. After all, once she found out about Madoc, she might press her advantage. Better to bring this moment to its crisis. And it worked. I looked down to hide my smile. Let Nicasia stay here and be your ambassador in Balekin's stead, Cardan says. She has grown up on these islands, and many who love her are here. That wipes the smile off my face. On the new island, the bark is pulling away from Nicasia's skin. I wonder what he's playing at, bringing her back to Elfham. With her will inevitably come trouble. And yet, maybe it's the sort of trouble he wants. If she wishes to stay, she may. Are you satisfied? Orlaf asked. Cardan inclines his head. I am. I will not be led by the sea, no matter how great its queen. As the High King, I must lead, but I must also be just. Here he pauses, and then he turns to me. And today I will dispense justice. You, Duarte, do you deny you murdered Prince Balekin, ambassador of the Undersea, and brother to the High King? I am not sure what he wants me to say. Would it help to deny it? If so, surely he would not put it to me in such a way that makes it clear he believes I did kill Balekin. Cardan has had a plan all along. All I can do is trust that he has a plan now. I do not deny that we had a duel and that I won it, I say, my voice coming out more uncertain than I'd like. All the eyes of the folk are on me, and for a moment, as I look out at their pitiless faces, I feel Maddox's absence keenly. Orlav's smile is full of sharp teeth. Hear my judgment, Cardan says, authority ringing his voice. I exile you Duarte to the mortal world, until and unless she is pardoned by the crown. Let her not step one foot in fiery or forfeit her life. I gasp. But you can do that! He looks at me for a long moment, but his gaze is mild, as though he's expecting me to be fine with exile, as though I am nothing more than one of his petitioners, as though I am nothing at all. Of course I can, he replies. But I'm the Queen of Fiery, I shout, and for a moment there is silence. Then everyone around me begins to laugh. I can feel my cheeks heat. Tears of frustration and fury prick my eyes as, a bit too late, Cardan laughs with them. At that moment, knights clap their hands on my wrists. Sir Rannoch pulls me down from the horse. For a mad moment, I consider fighting him as though 2,000 knights aren't around us. Deny it then, I yell. Deny me! He cannot, of course, so he does not. Our eyes meet, and the odd smile on his face is clearly meant for me. I remember what it was to hate him with the wall of my heart, but I've remembered too late. Come with me, my lady, Sir Rannoch says, and there is nothing I can do but go. Still, I cannot resist looking back. When I do, Cardan is taking the first step onto the new island. He looks every bit the ruler his father was, every bit the monster his brother wanted to become. Crow-black hair blown back from his face, scarlet cape swirling around him, eyes reflecting the flat grey emptiness of the sky. If Innswil is the Isle of Woe, Innsmire the Isle of Might, and Innsmore the Isle of Stone, he says, his voice carrying across the newly formed land, then let this be Innsir, Isle of Us.